Last night I tried using the really bad joke that clearly the wedding that we hear about in today's gospel is not a Catholic wedding, because they'd never run out of wine at a Catholic wedding. And of course, Jesus founds the Catholic Church, so it's not possible that there were actually Catholics at this time. It went over about as well as it did this morning too. So we see, though, that John tells us this is Jesus's first miracle. This is the first sign he performed in Cana in Galilee to reveal himself to his disciples. You might say, well, why does Jesus choose to do this miracle at a wedding feast? And why does he even choose to turn water into wine? Like, what's the significance here? I realize some of you might be saying, but Father, aren't we supposed to be talking this week about the Forming Missionary Disciples program? Didn't we start that last week? Isn't this week 2 the commitment weekend? And the answer, of course, is that it is. But this is actually all connected. That the reason Jesus chooses a wedding is because he's trying to reveal to us that he has come to redeem all of creation. We know that creation begins with a wedding. If we look back at the book of Genesis, as God creates Adam, he says, "It is not good for the man to be alone." So he creates Eve to be his fitting helpmate, a fitting partner for him. That is, God creates us male and female to reveal to us, to put it into our humanity that we are created for union and love. But of course we know that because of their sin, because of their disobedience, death and division enter the world. But Jesus here chooses a wedding as the first moment of a miracle to reveal he has come to redeem all of it. He has come to redeem and restore all of it. And not just a little bit. Like if we do a little bit of math here about like how much wine does Jesus actually make here? We're told there's 6 jars, like mason jars, like big jars, jugs, if you will, that are used for washing, each holding 20 to 30 gallons each. So we're talking something like over 150 gallons of wine. Or if we were to put that into like modern day bottles, we're talking like over 600 bottles of wine. And Jesus is doing this just to make abundantly clear there is a superabundance of his grace and his love. That he is ready to give himself without measure to us, to redeem us and restore us. And of course we know that while creation begins with this wedding feast, with this marriage of Adam and Eve, we're also told in the book of Revelation that creation will end, in a way, with a wedding feast. That is, we are destined for the wedding feast of the Lamb, where God will wed his bride, his people, to himself. We will be drawn into that communion of love that is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. And how do we get to that place is through making that gift of ourselves in love here and now. That is, we're invited to enter into relationship with the Lord, to receive his love for us, to become his disciples, and then as we grow in love for him, that we might make a gift of ourselves in love. That is, this is what our being created male and female reveals to us, is that we are made to make a gift of ourselves in love. And each one of us here, regardless of our state in life, regardless of whether we're married, single, consecrated in some way, every single one of us is invited to make a gift of ourselves in love. This applies to everyone. I realize some of you might object, but Father, I don't know if that quite applies to me. What we hear in today's second reading from St. Paul, he says, to each individual, some manifestation, some gift of the Spirit is given for the benefit of the church, for the building up of the church. That is, when it comes to being disciples of the Lord invites all of us, every single individual, every single person, to contribute in some way. That is, St. Paul is teaching us every one of us has received gifts, and we are invited to discern and to discover those gifts, that we might give ourselves in love and place those gifts in service of the building up of the church. That is, there's no such thing as a spectator when it comes to the Lord's plan of redemption. None of us can just sit back and watch other people do it. It isn't like, oh, this is just for the really holy people at the church, the people that go to daily mass and things like that. No, the Lord is inviting each one of us to give ourselves in love, to commit to the mission of this parish of St. John the Baptist Catholic Church. Now, I'm going to keep this homily very short and abbreviated today because we have the privilege of hearing from one of our parishioners. He's just going to share with us how the Lord has worked in his life, how the Lord has blessed him through being involved in our parish, and how it's allowed him to grow as a disciple of Jesus Christ. So at this time, I'd like to invite forward Larry Goekner, one of our parishioners, just to share a bit of his testimony with us.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Larry Goekner. My wife, Bronwyn, and I, along with our 6 children, ranging from age 5 up to 18, have been parishioners at St. John the Baptist for about 8 years now. We're typically 11 a.m. Sunday Mass goers. A few weeks ago, Father Dan asked me to speak at the Masses this weekend, and I had a similar reaction that Jonah had when the Lord asked him to go to Nineveh. If you recall that story, he went the other direction. As someone who prefers to operate behind the scenes or in smaller group settings, speaking in front of you today takes me outside of my comfort zone. Just as Jonah eventually answered the call to go to Nineveh, I'm responding to Father Dan's request, as there might be something useful for me to share with you today. And if so, that makes a positive impact on just one of you, this will have been worth it. Both my wife and I were raised Catholic. We met at a Catholic university, been practicing Catholics for our entire married life, which will be 20 years this year. Despite that pedigree, it really wasn't until the last 3 to 4 years that I'd say my faith life, marriage life, and family life really took a meaningful step into the deep richness that God offers us and calls us to. Perhaps my brief overview of this journey will speak to you and prompt you to take a step as well. This might sound familiar. You're striving to live a good life, personally, professionally, and spiritually. You regularly attend Mass, participate in the sacraments. Your life at work, at home, and in your family feels like it's taking everything you've got and more. And at the same time, you perhaps feel like you're hardly keeping up, and you're not getting or giving your best. Well, I certainly won't say that I've arrived. Indeed, I'm just getting started. St. John the Baptist and Father Dan's call for our parish to become a community of missionary disciples has changed my life. And here's the brief story. About 3 years ago, 16 years into marriage, Father Dan asked me to join his initial men's group at St. John the Baptist. I have to say that had that invitation come from anybody other than Father Dan, I would have politely declined or deferred due to the current and true demands of life. That invitation from Father Dan and my uncharacteristic yes set in motion what has become one of the greatest gifts of my life, the gift of fraternal small groups. It was a relatively short-lived time in that particular group, but it then branched out into others. There were a few of us from that group that started a separate men's group led by Bob Thornton, who leads the men's ministry here, and then started another group since then that I now lead, both of which have been a tremendous blessing to me, the other men, and our wives and children. In these small groups, we share, encourage, challenge, and support one another in our pursuit of holiness. Along the way, we're uncovering areas in need of healing, often areas previously unrecognized. The ongoing healing is blessing each of us, our families, and ultimately this parish community. For me, being part of a men's group is what I always needed, but never knew it until I experienced it. For the women of the parish, these small group opportunities for women are available in abundance as well. As I conclude, I want to thank each and every one of you for your faithful witness, which you're providing by being here today. I encourage you to prayerfully consider what the Lord might be asking of you to deepen your faith and enrich our parish. For the men of the parish, I'll issue a particular and targeted invite to consider joining me and the other men of the parish in Exodus 90, which starts tomorrow and runs through Lent. If anyone would like to further discuss anything I've shared today, I'd love to talk after Mass. God bless you all.
Thank you very much, Larry.